Today's episode of Brews and the Boys is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/brewsandtheboys. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Prepare your ears for a Waffle Butt Media podcast.
Welcome to the Brews and the Boys podcast. We are your neighborhood bar podcast. We drink cold beverages and there we go. We talk about America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Every week, we will be giving you an in-depth look into everything the Cowboys are doing and what we can expect from the Cowboys. My name is Michael Sizemore. I've been following and writing about the Cowboys for many years and currently contribute to Blogging the Boys. You may follow me on Twitter at Mr. Sizemore and follow the podcast at Brews and the Boys. With me, as always, is my producer and football illiterate sidekick, Timmy Two-Step.
Hello.
Who has been regulated to the producer's role from now until eternity.
Yeah.
But today we also brought back another, you guys seemed to get good feedback from you guys last week that you really liked having Tom Ryle from BTB. So he's going to start becoming a little bit more of a regular here. And hopefully soon we can have him just, maybe we can meet up and have a show where we're in the same room together. But Tom Ryle from Blogging the Boys is here today. You can follow him on Twitter at TomRyleBTB. So we're going to get down to it. We're going to be discussing some things that kind of heated up over the last time since we talked. We do this thing called, you remember the book that you had to read in high school called Tuesdays with Maury? Well, we're going to call this Thursdays with Tom. And we're just going to bring Tom Ryle in. And apparently Apparently this past week, there was just kind of a lot of Twitter talk about Jason Garrett, and it was brought up by a friend of mine, Marcus Mosier. Marcus, he used to write for me and worked with me at Cover 32 when I was the managing editor of the Cowboys page over there at Cover 32. And then Marcus has moved on to Bleacher Report now. But he brought up the fact that, and just kind of nonchalantly brought up a tweet that basically said, this is just another proof that Jason Garrett should not be the coach of the Dallas Cowboys because he hasn't had postseason success. Other stuff like everyone was talking about last week, basically just talking about the Eagles and being upset that the Eagles had won. So I just want to get into it, Tom. How did this come about? But first off, welcome back to the show, sir. Welcome back.
Yeah. Well, I want everybody out there to picture Kermit the Frog coming out, waving his arms and saying, "Yay!" Glad to be back.
Yeah, we love having Tom on the show, and like we said, he's going to be here quite a few times. You're going to hear him throughout the entire off season, at least once a week. So we got Tom Ryle here. It was a big get for us. It was our number one draft pick, and we spent it well. So Tom, tell us how this came about, and you can maybe read the actual tweet because I don't have it in front of me. But just go ahead and tell us how this Twitter feud started for the day.
Yeah, and to be honest, I would have to look at it. But to paraphrase, what I remember was that Marcus said, I kind of wish the Cowboys would tank so that we would finally get rid of Jason Garrett.
That's
and I was kind of like, and that was the gist of what he said. Which to me, he's kind of saying that his hatred of Garrett outweighs his wanting the team to succeed, and also underscores the fact that there are just a lot of people out there. They don't think that Jason Garrett has it in him to take this team all the way in the playoffs. And my take on it really was more from, I'm a fan of the Dallas Cowboys. They've made their decision for another year. Jason Garrett's going to be head coach. So now I want him to succeed. I want to see us snatch the division away from the Eagles and make a run on the Super Bowl themselves. Yeah, and it just kind of struck me as weird. And the other thing is something that just kills me is how big the recency bias is in the NFL, or the fan base especially. But it's also kind of that way in the media. Everybody looks at the last season, and it's like nothing else counts.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm gonna interrupt here for a second. So when I saw these tweets and I was reading through them, that recency bias that you're talking about is so on point because, and also just I'm with you there. Why would you want the team to not succeed? If you're a Cowboys fan, if you're a Cowboys writer, most of us online now, most of the credible Cowboys sources are actually Cowboys fans now. They're people that have joined, Blogging the Boys, or they've joined other realms where you can find really good stuff. It's because when you go to ESPN and you go to the other ones, you're basically getting quotes from players, and that's nice and things. But I got quotes from players during Tony Romo's event down in Dallas last year. Quotes from players, it's always going to be the same, the same type of stuff that the media is that their own, publication people are telling them to say. So it's never going to be anything that's just like, oh, wow. So I feel like a lot of people here are Cowboys fans that are writing about the Cowboys, and you get a lot of good stuff from people that way. And just to sit there and kind of want the team to fail, it's almost like, Tom, do they realize that if the team fails, that a lot of things change, not just
and the flip side of that is always I think it's no better than a 50-50 shot that you're going to see any improvement at all. And I would say that with Jason Garrett and certain things about the situation, I think it's more like a 75% chance that the team has to take a step back, go through another 4 or 5 year cycle, and then try all over again. And there are a lot of reasons that I think we're going to be talking about here.
Yeah.
Why it's a little premature. I'm not going to sit here and say that Jason Garrett should be bulletproof and not have to worry about his job. I'm just saying that it was a down season with a lot of really weird things going on, some of which were really out of Jason Garrett's control.
Yeah, and Tom, you told our listeners last week that you on the show, you said it twice on one on each episode, that you think Jason Garrett is going to get this year to coach, and they're going to evaluate that next year. And if things are not as good as they want them to be, they're going to make a change.
Yeah, this is with the record of going 12-4, 4-12, 13-3, 9-7. If it's another upswing and he gets it back together, and as I said, after a lot of stuff that went on, a lot of which was kind of outside of his control, there were problems that I think fell in his lap. But Jerry Jones, I think, and this I think is part of his whole thought process, Jerry Jones was busy trying to take down Roger Goodell over the Zeke Elliott situation.
Yes.
And I think Jones has to realize that he was not helping his team with all that.
No, he was not helping his team, and I will tell you this, I'm not, I don't think you are either. Neither one of us are conspiracy theorists. We're just not. That's just not how we do business. But the fact that the Cowboys, weren't getting holding calls last year, blatant holding calls, these things, they all kind of, this is the NFL here. If you watch the two Bills, which was about Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells, that's on that 30 for 30, Bob Kraft said he was upset, back then he was upset because basically Bill Parcells accepted a job with the New York Jets to be the head coach when he was still under contract with the Patriots as the head coach. So Bob Kraft was new to the NFL. He was new to ownership. He said, that doesn't seem right to me. That seems like tampering. Doesn't seem like you can take my coach away from me. And when he called the NFL office, they told him, hey, it's better if Bill Parcells stays in New York. It's better for the NFL. And he said to the camera, to the hard cam, he just said, that's when I found out that the NFL's front office is not, is just not the most iron tight, squeaky clean thing. It's not. It's just not. They're not always they're not always fair. And like Tim just said, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a goose. But getting back to go ahead.
There's obviously things that go on the whole Ezekiel Elliott thing, no matter what else you think about it, it was horribly handled all the way along. And there just seemed to be a cloud that gathered around the Cowboys.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as much a conspiracy theory as in you've got a certain corporate culture, and when somebody is on the outs with the culture, the corporation, a lot of the people down the chain have a tendency to kind of want to, say, play along with the party line in that case to protect their own hides. And it's not that they're consciously thinking, yeah, we're going to shaft the Cowboys in this game. It's that they're a little more hesitant to throw flags that are going to help the Cowboys without even really thinking about it. So I'm not saying the officials were doing bad as in having ill intentions. I'm saying they kind of let that get in their heads. It's just a theory, but of course, the problem I have is I try to look at things with a lot more nuance than a lot of people. So many people want it all black and white. I did a whole article that was up on Blogging the Boys about that. It's not just simple flip this switch and it fixes everything. Fire this guy, hire this guy. You have to get so many things right in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think the title of your article was perfect. It was like, there are no silver bullets in fixing the Cowboys. Yes. I thought that was great. Yeah. That was a great title, and that was perfect. It was a perfect article too because it's so correct.
And the funny thing is that people tend to lock in on, here's the path you got to take. Well, there's a lot of different paths to success, and you make, depending on who your coach is and how you line up your coaching staff, that can change who you want to draft, how you want to, what kind of a playbook you're going to put together. Everything just kind of dominoes.
Yeah.
And, so I think this is a chance. It's time to see if Garrett can put it back together. And, I think that there's some good things. I kind of am liking what they did with at least a couple of the hires. I think Richard has me just excited. I'm giddy about what he's going to do with the secondary. Yeah. And I also am really hoping Richard is going to kind of sidle up to Rod and say, look, if he gets you a real good one tech and put in there, because I would love to see him grab one of the top guys. I'm one of the guys that's on the Vita Vea train. I think we're kind of dreaming about that. But there's, I think, Deron Payne, and some other guys.
There's a guy named I'm writing about a guy named Tavon Bryan who's from Florida. Yeah. That guy, now he's 6'3" and 291, so he kind of fits that, is he a 3-tech? But if you watch that guy, his comparison from Dane Brugler was Fletcher Cox, and I would take that any day of the week, having someone like that there.
But now that we've got to see how all this plays out, and every team has to go through adjustments. The Patriots are unique in that Bill Belichick seems to have adjustments every year to get them right back to the top. He's the only guy in the NFL right now that has that capacity.
Yeah. With Bill Belichick, he won the Super Bowl that he won, the second one that he won with the Giants. If you remember, they changed their defense every single game of the playoffs. Like, he changed the way, he didn't do a 4-3, a 3-4. He did 2 sets of dime in the first game. He did an all nickel in the next game. He played, I think what you're getting to is Bill Belichick knows the NFL well, and he knows how teams play, and he is willing to abandon philosophy for certain ideas because he's more of a X's and O's like genius is kind of what I think of him.
Yeah, and he also seems to be extremely good at building his staff.
Yeah,
because it's like they come in and steal some of his people every year, and he just goes out and finds some more guys. And I remember reading an article about Patricia when he came on board. Here's this aerospace engineer who has no football background really. He says, I want to coach, and gets in and he goes in to see Belichick, and they just Belichick just grills him and goes through stuff and just convinces himself the guy's got the knowledge, and then tells him, okay, here's what I'm going to have you do. And, so now Patricia's cycled through and has gone off to be a head coach himself.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get back into this Jason Garrett stuff. We're going to take a quick break real quick and pause for some advertisements here on the Blogging the Boys podcast. The Brews and the Boys podcast. We will be right back with more Tom Ryle talking about Jason Garrett and the notions that everyone believes that this guy just needs to be fired. So we'll be right back here on Brews and the Boys podcast.
Today's episode of Brews and the Boys is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/brewsandtheboys. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
With Tom Ryle from Blogging the Boys. You can find him on Twitter at Tom Ryle BTB. And so we're talking about the Jason Garrett era. We're talking about Jason Garrett in general, and we're just how people seem to just think that he needed to be fired after a 9-7 season in 2017, and how crazy it is. People forget that this guy was 2016's Coach of the Year. He took a team that was built for Tony Romo, that lost Tony Romo in the preseason. Then he brings in a rookie quarterback who was a 4th-round pick, who might as well have been a 5th-round pick because he was taken 135 which was a compensatory pick, and turns it into a 13-3 season and a playoff run that unfortunately they ran into, like Tom likes to say, Aaron F. Rodgers. You can just already what that middle initial stands for. So there's a lot of beef with Jason Garrett. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So we thought we'd bring in Tom Ryle, who is BTB's resident guru, Jason Garrett disciple. So I want to start here. Jason Garrett won Coach of the Year in 2016, and now fans want him fired after 9-7. So why are fans not seeing how insane that would be to let Garrett go after such an achievement the year before? What do you think is the problem here?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say this, but basically I attribute a lot of it to just stupid. You're not thinking things through. Everyone condemned how they couldn't adjust, how the coaching was all wrong in 2017. That was the same staff that worked a miracle with Dak Prescott and company in 2016.
Yep.
Something went wrong. Okay, they made some mistakes. I do think for some reason they decided they were going to try to fit Prescott more into the old Romo-style offense than fit the offense to Dak Prescott. I think they've said, okay, we really, pardon the term, screwed the pooch on that one.
Yeah.
So now let's back up and take another shot. And there's something I'll get into shortly that you've got. I've seen you've got ready for your other questions that we'll touch on that I think plays a factor significantly there. But that's why another season seems very appropriate, because if he did it just a year ago, just, one season back, why don't they think he can probably pull it together, make some corrections, and hopefully have a much quieter off season? And I know this is asking for a biblical miracle, but maybe not get any suspensions and go in and know who you're going to have on the field from week to week, barring injury.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And I want to go back before we go forward here. Jason Garrett this will be his eighth season that he's taken over for the Cowboys here. This will be his 8th full season. He did take over in the middle of the 2010 season, went 5-3 down the stretch there. But I looked at it and I looked at Tony Romo's career, and as Jason Garrett was the head coach, Tony Romo only played 2 full 16-game seasons in 2011 and 2012. And in 2011, if you remember, Tony Romo had that amazing game where he punctured his lung, and broke ribs. He was never really healthy with Jason Garrett as the head coach. And the Cowboys kind of started that whole – Garrett took over this team and pretty much started pushing out a lot of what Wade Phillips had brought to the team, a lot of players that weren't playing up to snuff, and he kind of flipped over the organization. And I think by the time that they bring Scott Linehan in, Scott Linehan is a guy that has worked with, prolific passing guys. Like even Mark Bolger for the Rams was like a guy that could pass all over the field. Romo the same way. And definitely in Detroit with Matthew Stafford, I think that Scott Linehan, there's a point to what you're saying there. Scott Linehan did so well with Dak Prescott in the first year, and then just tried to change him a little bit in the second year, and it just wasn't working. So that's what I think that just to put that part to bed, I just want people to understand that it's not like Jason Garrett has really, he deals with a lot of circumstances since he's taken over. So let's get to the next part here. In your article, you talk about the relationship that has been kind of cultivated between Jason Garrett and the Jones family, dating way back, and why it kind of weighs heavily on decisions to give him 2018 to prove himself. So I want to know, why? Talk about that relationship and talk about why they have, kind of attached themselves to each other for such a long period of time.
I think it kind of is one of those where you get positive feedback on something. Garrett and the Jim, his father Jim, go way back with the team, and it's a shame that Jim Garrett passed away just a couple of days ago. But he was a guy who truly loved football, passed it on to his son, and then his son came into the team, was the good soldier as the backup quarterback, then went off, got a start in coaching, and then came back to the Cowboys as a coach. Jerry Jones is a man who, my take is that he really likes to have someone that he knows how to work with, that he trusts, and that he can they speak the same language. And that, I think, is something that Garrett has been around Jones so long. He has a character that I think appeals with his whole kind of very, he likes to look at ideals. He likes to set high goals. He likes to demand a lot of people in a way, which I never can figure out why they have so many discipline problems. So I'm not sure what goes on with some of that. I just know that everything you hear about what Garrett wants from his players and what he preaches to them, it just makes so much sense, and it's really a high quality approach to things. He basically creates the kind of culture that I would like to be a part of whenever I hear him talk about stuff.
Yeah, his father's strength, Tom, was leading young men. And he led, Jim Garrett always spoke about, and rest in peace, Jim Garrett, and our condolences definitely go to the entire Garrett family. But Jim always spoke about you can't coach the player if you don't coach the man. And he did that well. And I think Jason Garrett is almost an exact copy of his father. He's a very optimistic type of guy. He doesn't waste a lot of time looking at the negative parts of life. He loves life just like his father did. And so he loves coaching men and getting them ready to play a game that demands a lot from them, but can also bring them a ton of elation and a ton of credit, going and, championships or what have you there. I just think Jason Garrett's a good leader of men. It doesn't necessarily reflect on him that some of his guys make dumb decisions. That's just young guys being stupid. But I just think that the relationship between an owner and the head coach, it's got to be very important. And if you look at the way Jerry Jones had dealt with things in the past, and he would change coaches every couple of years, or he would fire a guy or something like that. I think he kind of changed his way when he put Garrett in position, even dating back to the offensive coordinator position. He knew that one day he wanted him to be the head coach, and he wants him to succeed. So I think that Jerry Jones doesn't want to start firing guys and going and hiring a bunch of new coaches all the time, especially coaches like we talked about Bill Parcells earlier. everyone talks about Jerry Jones being a meddler and meddling in everything, but in that same 30 for 30, Bob Kraft said the reason that he and Bill Parcells didn't get along so well is because Bill Parcells did that whole comment about if you're gonna cook the dinner, they should let you shop for the groceries. And he said that Bill Parcells didn't want him to be involved, and he was the owner and wanted to be involved. Yeah. That's just how it is. All owners today want to be involved.
Yeah, and that's a lot of people might want to not say this is kind of a laughable thing, but one of the key things is that Jason Garrett doesn't compete for the microphone with Jerry Jones.
No.
Jerry Jones is the face and the voice of the Cowboys because he wants to be the face and the voice of the Cowboys. Yeah. Garrett, as far as he's concerned, if he never had to talk to the press, I don't think we'd see him from the start of training camp until the season was over in front of a camera, other than on the sidelines during a game.
His son Steven's the same way. They both let Jerry take the mic.
Yeah. Yeah, Steven kind of comes along and has a lot of like, well, let me tell you the truth of things. Mm-hmm. But because it's a father-son relationship, I think, Jerry's okay with the fact that they kind of sometimes have a different take. And I think they have a pretty dynamic way of working stuff out. I seem to remember a story about Steven slamming Jerry up against a wall over something.
Deion Sanders. It was over Deion Sanders.
Yeah, but that was Garrett is just has a unique personality in the fact that he doesn't. A lot of coaches have to go out there and be the alpha dog in front of everybody. Mm-hmm. Garrett doesn't have to go out and show he's the alpha dog. He just goes out on the practice field and is.
Yeah, true. That's true. Just, if you've ever been to training camp like I have, you see that. He is the leader.
And that is just, he doesn't have to prove. He's a rare person in that aspect, and that he doesn't have to go out and show you all this stuff. He's just going to go do it. And if you care to notice, fine. And if you don't notice, well, that's not any skin off of his nose.
Yeah. So moving on here, Garrett. So Jason Garrett's been getting a lot of heat this past week and a half from the Marcuses and the Joey Ikes and Marcus Mosher of the world. They were talking about everyone talks about the lack of depth on the roster from 2017, but it's kind of interesting to me because they want to blame the Cowboys for the Eagles winning the championship with their depth is what they want to blame the Cowboys. But if you think about it, last year the Cowboys, Tyron Smith was dealing with problems and Chaz Green played well. So it's kind of like what I want to get into is like, I know you want to blame coaches and you want to blame Jason Garrett specifically for everything that ever happened to you from day one of your life to now. But the lack of depth might be concerning, Tom, but don't these players have a role in their own subpar performances?
Yeah. And I think there's two factors in it. The players are one. There were things that just didn't seem right. There were a lot of players, a lot of times. I think some of the receivers didn't seem to really be knowing how to do the right thing, and things just didn't seem to fit. Which I'm wondering how much that played into the changeover in the assistant coaches, particularly on offense. They've changed out a lot of people. Lyle, is that how you pronounce the Sanjay Lal? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Sanjay Lal. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think he was brought in because there was a lot of discontent with how the receiver corps was helping or not helping Dak Prescott out. The offensive line, I'm not sure whether Frank Pollock was a part of the problem or was a bit of a scapegoat, which was something I went into in my article briefly. But I've seen an indication that there was some unhappiness about the coaching on the offensive line through most of the season. And, I think it all goes back to where did the whole thing about Chaz Green as a guard come from?
Yeah.
If it came from the ownership because, we've got a third-round draft pick invested in him, well, Jerry and Steven ought to, go out and flagellate themselves over that.
Yeah.
It was just stupid.
Yeah.
If it came from Garrett was pushing it, then he taken the blame, and he kind of dumped it on Pollock. And Scott Linehan handed that too on him. But was this Scott Pollock's pet project?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's a good question.
That's one of those ones where you want to kind of get the owners and coaches in a room and slip up a little truth serum, and just find out what really went down. And because it's really hard to understand, have they fixed the problem, or did they just kind of blame someone and move on? I'm kind of like wait and see. I think that the offensive line coach change to Paul Anderson may work out just fine. I like the aspects I hear about him wanting to tailor the coaching to the player's abilities and let him kind of develop what is his strongest style. That's kind of an exciting sounding idea to me, and I'm surprised that it hasn't been done more, and yet it seems very typical that you go to someone in the NFL and the coach is going to tell you how you're going to play, how you're going to put your hands, and I don't think they do a good job of looking if maybe they need to do something a little bit differently with one player over another. Why should you want to coach Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins the same way? They're not the same person. They don't have the same frame. They don't have the same athleticism. So maybe you want to have differences there, which I think it's going to be interesting to see. I want to see how that works out. I am kind of excited that it may work out, but I'm not going in with any belief that, that's definitely the solution.
No, and
that kind of thing has happened. As for the players, that's what the whole thing of all the circus from last year. I think that the team consistently understated how that was roiling the locker room.
Yes, correct.
I can't imagine that not getting under your skin.
No, absolutely. I believe that too. And just to go back to that Chaz Green thing you were saying, I agree with you there. I think that somebody there said, and it might have been the ownership, but I think it could have been coaching too, that just said Chaz has to play because he's a third-round pick from us, and Jonathan Cooper might have been a former first-round pick, but we didn't spend that on him. That was another team that did that. We want the best caliber lineman on the field, but Chaz Green is a tackle from here until the next year. He's never guard. It was not comfortable for him. I didn't think he played well there, even in the preseason. It just was. He's a different type of athlete than what you want as a guard. He's very finesse, and he's more of a tackle. And seeing him in the middle there, he just didn't have what it took to be a guard. And when they got Jonathan Cooper in there, he did play a lot better. Didn't play great, but he played a lot better there. I feel somewhere there they failed the player. That's on coaching and definitely on the ownership that they failed the player there. But I do think that players, the Dez Bryants you are Dez Bryant. You're a great receiver. You've caught 76 touchdowns or whatever it is for the Cowboys. And you at some point need to say, hey, if something's not working here, us as receivers, we need to start doing our own thing. We can't just keep following what we're being told that's not working, and help your quarterback out. Plays break down all the time, and I just don't think that when things broke down for Dak or broke down for this team, that they did a good job of responding. The players did. I don't think they did a good job as players responding and playing up to their abilities.
I also want to circle back around because you talked a little about the whole depth, and the Cowboys didn't use free agency enough to get it all. Garrett's got a very methodical, almost scientific approach to how he wants to do that stuff. And I think he is just not inclined. He doesn't have the makeup of going in and doing the short-term fixes, which is kind of what free agency is. Short-term free agency, let's fix it now, but since you're dealing with a player who's on a second or third contract, it's not going to really be a solution for 5 or 6 years. It's going to be a 2 or 3 year solution, most likely. And Garrett wants to bring young players in, develop them, and not have as much turnover with your best players, and he wants to do that with depth too. That's that's something that a lot of people don't. A lot of people think he ought to back off from that. That's just part of his DNA. He's going to want to do it that way, and so he's got a little bit different approach. And the downside is that you tend to have very good starters with that, but it is a little bit harder to get your depth. And you've got to have a lot of help from the scouting department and from management to find and to retain the people that you want.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And so moving on here, so when Cowboys fans start to call for Jason Garrett's job, it's popular for them to come up with these unrealistic replacements. And I tweeted out, I'm sure my producer here, Tim, I tweeted out from our Brews and the Boys Twitter that I wanted to know what people thought who the Cowboys should have hired if it wasn't going to be Jason Garrett in 2018, because I wanted to prove to them, I said be as realistic as possible, but I wanted to prove to them that no matter what they chose, it was going to be something that it's just not going to happen. So first off, you got quite a few of them that would say Tony Romo, which is... They just think that because Tony Romo was such a good quarterback for the Cowboys, or he was such a good offensive mind there, that he just wants to leave his cushy job with CBS and his 3 kids and his beautiful wife and everything that he's got.
And his golf tournaments.
And his golf tournaments, and come and coach the Cowboys. And it's just... I'm sorry, Cowboys fans. He doesn't want to coach for your he doesn't want to coach right now. He does not want to coach.
And probably take a significant pay cut to boot.
Yeah, he would have to take a very significant pay cut to come be an assistant coach for the Dallas Cowboys. And I just think people need to let that go, among other things. But then there's guys talking about there was a gentleman there that thought he brought forth 5 good names, and 2 of his names I just have to poke holes all through this. Jim Harbaugh and Nick Saban would never, ever, ever, ever be a coach for the Dallas Cowboys. One, they
would never be a coach for Jerry Jones.
Yes.
That's where the real crux is.
And
Nick Saban is a control freak from start to finish, and he would last about halfway through the first meeting.
Yeah.
With Jerry,
and with Nick Saban, and Tom, with Nick Saban, if you remember this, when he was with the Miami Dolphins and Jason Garrett was his quarterback's coach, he left the Dolphins because he didn't like the fact that college and the pros were so different with the media, he couldn't control the media in the pros. Yeah. Miami Herald was like, hey, you suck, and the team's bad. And he was like, I want you to say something positive. And he's like, positive? There's nothing. We don't answer to you.
I wish he got this job with the Jets.
Oh, wouldn't that have been in New York?
He might never recover from that.
Yeah. And then you talk about Jim Harbaugh, who's now back in college too. He is very similar to Nick Saban. Went back to college because he didn't like the way the NFL is where the big boys play. That's what happens. You have to. Your job as a coach, more so as a head coach, is to not only you're managing personalities. You're managing personalities of players, and you're managing personalities of your coaching staff, and you're bringing that together. So I just want to know your thoughts on the fact that every time they call for Jason Garrett's job, they come up with these asinine, ass 11, ass 12 names that are just not going to happen.
And that's my whole thing is, who do you think's going to come in and do better? Who's going to work as well with Jerry Jones, and in the future with Stephen Jones? I don't get it. There's, we've seen some just horrible head coaching marriages with Jerry Jones, and he's finally got one that works in a lot of ways, which I think, again, is why he's got a little extra patience. Now, there's a limit to it, and, Garrett can screw the things up if things fall apart for the team and there's not an obvious aspect of it that was out of his control. Mm-hmm. But still, to me, it's logical that Jerry Jones is wants to give him another year, and do what he can to make it work.
Yeah, I agree with you. And but we got two more questions here for you before we get out of here. But one of them, so just in your mind, what do you believe are Jason Garrett's greatest strengths and weaknesses as a coach?
I don't think he is for weakness. Let's deal with that a little bit first. I don't think he's nearly as flexible as he needs to be sometimes. He's not as agile. He's got a plan. He wants to stick to the plan. He wants to follow the process, and it takes a lot to divert him from that, more than a lot of other people. You know, you talked about Bill Belichick, how he is remarkably able to just, okay, let's throw out the game plan from last week and go with something entirely different. Now, that's not going to happen on a Jason Garrett coach team. That's not quite the way he's wired. I also think he is a bit more cautious than he needs to be. He does have some conservatism in his play calling, where he's more concerned with doing less damage than with taking the risk and getting a big payoff. So that's a couple things that I have a little bit of problem with. His strengths are that I think the players pretty much know what to expect from him day in and day out. I think things are laid out pretty clearly what the team wants. I do think, for whatever reason, this is a theory of mine, I think their off-the-field stuff is something that is more they answer to the Joneses about than they do to Garrett. Mm-hmm. And maybe they ought to change that a little bit. That might help a little bit. But on the field, I think they know that Garrett is the man. He is in charge. It's his vision, and his vision is extremely clear to them. And I think that's something that works a lot in a sports situation, where when your players really know where you're going and what they're supposed to do, I think that works to their advantage. So that's a strength of his. And he also is not going to overreact to stuff. Where he's sometimes not flexible enough, he's also not prone to, oh my gosh, we had a bad couple of games, let's start throwing this out, let's hammer the quarterback, let's do that. He's going to just say, nope, we're just going to keep moving forward. And ultimately, I think if you've ever listened to him, you know, he's like, this is football. This is a game. Life is more important. And we're going to try to have a little bit of dignity with these guys. Yeah. But that's what I see.
Yeah. So lastly, we could have a Jason Garrett conversation for like 3 hours, but lastly,
I thought of just probably a whole 30-minute segment, just talking a little bit about the idea that he wasn't going for it on fourth down enough.
Yeah. So
last year, and I could go on a riff on that. So you might file that away to have me see if I can resurrect the thoughts.
We might have to just do. We might have to do another part 2 to this next week. But I mean, I want to know what you think as far as he has one playoff win as the head coach, and he's 8 seasons in. I want to know what you think contributes most to the fact that he had the lack of playoff success that he's had with just the one win, and the fact that the last couple times they've been there, they've been able to win. They're like one and done. What do you think contributes the most to that?
Well, I've got something I think that would drastically improve their chances. Does anybody know where Aaron F. Rodgers lives? And can we get somebody go decap you? I'm sorry, I would never suggest actually hurting someone. But twice we've watched him just make pinpoint passes at crucial times, and it just miraculously escaped the defensive linemen that were being tackled to the ground.
Yeah.
It just drives you crazy. And it's such a small sample size. Sometimes football is a game of matchups. There are some teams that are always going to be better against Team A and B than they are against Team C and D because of how they match up. And Green Bay, specifically Rodgers, but also in other ways, just seems to be one of those poor matchups.
Yeah.
Other teams, the Cowboys match up very well against.
Yeah.
So, I just think we have to see what happens. Now, once again, if they went in, let's say they had an 11-5, 12-4 season, go into the playoffs and are one and done again. That, to me, would be a time when Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones need to sit down and maybe pull in, Will McClay for some wisdom and input, and just say, is this just the ceiling with this coach?
Yeah.
And that's a very real question. I would say if he did 2 one-and-dones in a row, that he's gone. We're done trying. We're not going to be the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And keep a coach around forever. We're not going to let a coach go 2 seasons with no wins, like the Browns have done.
Yeah.
But anyway, that you have to see that. But if he goes to the playoffs and wins 1 game, then okay, we want to roll another year. If he wins 2 games, okay, then he's probably bought another season beyond that. If he wins the Super Bowl, then could everybody just STFU and let's just move ahead?
That it couldn't have been said better. Tom Ryle bringing the heat today for you guys, letting you know about Jason Garrett. We could have multiple conversations on this. We are up against the clock. We gave you a lot longer episode than you expected today, but Tom Ryle needed to get this off his chest. He's had so many Twitter feuds with people that just do not have patience. And it's crazy to fire the coach of the year from the year prior and just fire him after a 9-7 season. Cowboys fans, you do remember that the Cowboys had a winning record, correct? 9-7 was the record. They didn't, go 6-10 or 5-11 like some people are acting like they did. We want to thank Tom Ryle for joining us again. He'll be back with us next week. You can find Tom at Tom Ryle BTB on Twitter. We want to thank you guys for joining us. You can follow us on Twitter at Brews and the Boys. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Brews and the Boys. You can follow me at Mr. Sizemore. And never forget to send all of your hate mail to Timmy Two-Step. That's on Twitter at TIMMYIISTEP. Thank you for joining the Brews and the Boys podcast again, Tom. And we will see you next week. And we will see the fans as well.
Yay!
Goodbye.
Bye.
Now this is podcasting.